everywhere indeed, as we are currently now live on our Facebook and also on our YouTube channel. So tell a friend to tell a friend to go and tune in. Why, you may ask? Simply because our friend Graham is dialing in.
Morning, Sakhe. How you doing? Good
You
morning,
heard
Sakhe. Can you hear me?
Graham is on the other side of the world. Good morning, Graham. How are you doing?
Good morning, Sakhe. It's certainly a lot colder here in London than in Cape Town. But really delighted to be dialing in today. As you can see, I'm wearing my standard issue Cape Union Mod puffer jacket. Although I must say it's designed for South Africa, not necessarily the cold over here in the UK. But so far, it's doing the job.
Awesome. What are you doing in London and the UK?
So, Sakhe, we here meeting with business partners in the UK. So we're expanding the Bizval offering internationally. I've actually just come back from 2 days in the port of Southampton to help actually a South African business owner who's just bought a jewelry business over there. So,
Wow.
extending beyond our business through to our clients. And for those of you who don't know, Southampton's probably better known as the port from which the Titanic sailed. So it's been a busy week of meetings,
Mhm.
introductions, lots of coffee. Although I should say at £4.50 for a coffee, which is almost 120 rand. Well, but
What?
based on what the rand's done since I've left, it might even be more than that. It might just be hot water rather than coffee. Um, and yeah, I think today it's going to be a slightly shorter show. We're going to share a few insights from experience in the UK this far,
Mhm.
and how business owners in South Africa can potentially learn from those, some of the things here in the UK and apply that to their businesses. It's probably going to be a little bit ad-libbed as I haven't had as much time as usual to prepare and still
Yeah.
catching up on my sleep after a long flight a few days ago.
Forward we go, Graham. We are now here, so forward we go. Also in the same breath, let us know what will we be chatting about today.
Yeah, so there's a few things. The first one I'm going to touch on is sort of the importance of infrastructure and how that supports business.
Yeah.
The level of automation and AI, which is something that I've certainly noticed since I've been in the UK. The importance of small business. We touch on this all the time, and it's really
Mhm.
apparent here. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Pricing in foreign markets, for business owners, this is quite an interesting thing. It sounds quite technical, but we'll talk about that. Knowing and understanding your market and the local nuances. So as I say, we're launching our business here. It's not simply a case of cut and paste. You need to make some changes. And I'm going to talk about two other things, maybe not that business related, but one, the role of the pub, the traditional English pub, and
Okay.
two, just kind of, about South Africans and how much we have to offer. I think that's become quite apparent
Mhm.
on this trip. I've been here a few times in the past, but,
Yeah.
when you come with a different lens on, you see things through a different perspective sometimes.
Awesome. Now let's get to the meat of things and talk us through the themes and also share what you've learned thus far.
Sure. So as I said, let's talk a little bit about infrastructure. So, one of the most obvious things when you come to a country like the UK, for those of you who haven't traveled, I'll have to describe it a little bit, but is how well designed and established the infrastructure is, but also how it really aids economic growth and the quality of life. So, the most obvious of these is the transport network. So,
Mhm.
there's trains, buses, planes, e-scooters. So getting around is really, really easy and generally quite affordable. And the other thing which is really ubiquitous is Wi-Fi networks.
Mhm.
So pretty much everywhere you go, you can connect to Wi-Fi. In South Africa, cost of data is often a big issue.
Mhm.
But over here, even if you don't have a lot of data, there's Wi-Fi on every corner basically. So it's not
Sure.
even just in the cities, it's between cities. So, think about I caught a 2-hour train from London to Southampton, Wi-Fi on board. Imagine if you're catching your taxi from Khayelitsha to,
Yeah.
center of Cape Town and you had Wi-Fi on board. That's
Mhm.
the kind of level of infrastructure that's there.
Yeah.
And, it's a bit like the skeleton of or the framework that allows things to happen. So when I left on Monday, as I said, the trip to Southampton, it was a 2 hour trip. I left at 7 o'clock. The train was quiet, it was clean, it was safe. I could literally put my headphones on and do 2 hours worth of work. And that's actually when I planned for the session.
Yeah.
So it worked really well. And it allows easy access for commuters of all means, all persuasions, and all stage of life. So, you know, things like wheelchair platforms and access, we don't often think about those things.
Hmm.
And for business owners, what this does is it creates lots of opportunities. So, you can access skills from a wide variety of areas, not just people living within 5 minutes of where you stay. You know that your staff are safe on commutes. They're going to get to work safely. They can get home safely. And, in South Africa, that's a real challenge. You come to a country like this, and I think people just take it for granted. So, it's something that we need to be aware of. And I think, what you also see is the massive opportunities along the transport hubs. So at
Hmm.
every station, there's hundreds of coffee shops, snack bars, hairdressers, and you have these sort of hyper localized business communities that exist around all the transport hubs. So, yeah, I mean, the point around infrastructure is it's very easy to see how it aids economic growth and business
Yeah.
development when it's there. When you don't have it or you've never experienced that, sometimes you just don't know what you're missing out on. So
Mm.
that was a really key takeout for me in terms of infrastructure.
Yeah, and I'll talk us through what you learned through automation and AI.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. We use these terms like AI and automation, and they sound all fancy and what have you. But in South Africa, sometimes it's a bit hard to appreciate this and how prevalent it is overseas. So I'll use a couple of really simple examples. The one is sort of parking and traffic management. So sometimes it feels a little bit like Big Brother is watching. But you go into parkade in South Africa. I think some of the centers now have this thing where you just tap your phone and the wireless parking. It's at the next level over here.
Yeah.
So the camera tracks your registration number. You go in, and if you don't pay for your parking at the checkout at the store, you get a fine in the post a few days later. Okay, so it's that there's no avoiding compliance with the law and what have
Yeah.
you. So there's quite a lot of surveillance. Self-service checkouts in most of the stores. So think about the implications of that. You go to the equivalent of a Woolworths, and 90% of the checkouts are self-service. So there's
Oh,
one or two
wow.
cashiers, and the rest you do yourself. And then like ticketing and payments, so if you're going on the tube or a bus, you tap your credit card, it's all integrated. There's a set limit on what you spend on transport every day. I can't remember what it is. I think it's £8 or £7.
Wow.
But you don't even have to keep track of that. It automatically in the
Mhm.
background, you use the transport, you tap it, and when you hit the limit, it stops charging you. So that's something, I think about it again, how we use public transport in South Africa. You need your cash to pay the taxi driver,
Mhm.
and it's just a different way. And from a business point of view, that's super, super interesting because it allows the business people to focus on not the peripheral stuff, but actually
Mhm.
focusing on the customer and giving them a great experience. So, yeah, that was a really interesting insight for me from sort of automation and AI and how it's really integrated into the economy and into the way of doing life here.
Yeah. And with regards to small businesses, or rather the importance of them, small businesses, what did you learn?
Yeah, so I touched on it when I spoke about infrastructure,
Mhm.
and a lot of it is centered around transport hubs. You still have in every little village, you've got the high streets, and there's literally hundreds and thousands of small businesses, and there's a wide variety of jobs. Yeah, there's no stigma attached to different kind of levels of roles. Yeah, I think sometimes in South Africa there's a stigma of like, what job do you do? Is it a
Mhm.
a blue collar
Yeah.
or white collar role? And that here, jobs are respected across the spectrum. Well, that's been my experience, and there's a wide variety of different jobs. The other thing is that I think they recognize the importance of small business. So to open up a company and register it is super, super easy. We've just opened up our UK company. It took all of, you know, 15 minutes online to open the company and the bank account and everything. And it's all done electronically. So it's super easy to open a business. And, we say the infrastructure is like the skeleton of an economy. Small businesses are like the lifeblood of the economy. So it's what creates opportunities for jobs and, employment creation. And it doesn't exist in isolation. So, that for me is really, really apparent. And, I think there's some learnings we can take is that we really need to get better at supporting small businesses and,
Mm.
making sure it's seen as a legitimate career path, as opposed to being something you do if you can't get a job.
Yeah. Now you talked us through some a few points and themes. What about pricing in foreign markets?
So this for me is super interesting. So, for South Africans coming to the UK, things are expensive. And in most cases, 2 to 3 times more expensive than in South
Sure.
Africa. Keeping local. Yesterday afternoon, I had a Nando's burger. So Nando's is huge in the UK.
Okay.
And one, it didn't taste nearly as good as in South Africa. And you guys are going to, have a heart attack, but £11. So you do the math. That's 260 Rand for a Nando's burger.
No, no.
That's with
Mm-mm.
no chips or wedges or,
Sure.
or Coke on the side. So, so things are expensive.
Yeah.
Um, and I think even for locals, basic salaries are not, as much as people have a good quality of life here, it's not as though locals are flush with lots of money, but everyone's at a sort of generally a higher standard. But
Yeah.
people are cost conscious, and I think what this does is it creates opportunities. So part of the reason we launch in the UK is if you can provide services from a place like South Africa. So you bring this all together. You have infrastructure, you have automation, and you have a price disparity. You can actually produce a product or service in South Africa and sell it to the UK. So what that enables you to do is you can charge more than you would to a customer in South Africa because people can afford more, and you can grow your South African business. But you can also it still come in at a point which is a lot cheaper than what other UK businesses are able to provide. And at the same
Yeah.
time, you're paying your South African staff a great salary. It doesn't have to be like on the low end. So I think there's a lot of those opportunities for South African businesses to think about not just the UK but other foreign markets, how they can service those. For example, the silver jewelry business that I helped in the UK, they've got a factory in KZN where they employ over 30 people. They produce all their jewelry in South Africa, and they
Hmm.
create a lot of employment for South Africans. But most of their goods are sold to the UK. And one of the things, yeah, about the infrastructure is they ship their goods to the UK, and then they use the postal delivery service, which is cheap and efficient. They don't have any issues with, you know, silver rings or chains or ever getting stolen in the post, and so it enables them to distribute the product cheaply in the UK. But those are the kinds of opportunities, as South African business owners, if we open our minds, that exist. And we have to accept that you may be living and running a business in Muizenberg, but we're part of a broader and bigger, global economy. So that's super interesting for me. I want to maybe just touch on, a few other points.
Hmm.
I spoke about earlier about understanding your markets and the local nuances. So people might think, oh, we've got a common language with the UK. We speak English, and by implication, it means things are easy. But I think if you want to be successful, you have to accept that there are many differences in foreign markets. So, the obvious ones are traffic light versus robot, or,
Yeah.
if you say to somebody, in the way, if you say sorry, in England, you say, excuse me. It's a really simple thing. If you say sorry, people look at you like,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with you. Um, there's a different sense of humor. Etiquette, like, if you're walking up an escalator, you walk on the you stand on the right hand side and people walk past you on the left. In South Africa, I think it's the other way around. So,
Yeah.
and from a business perspective, you need to understand these things. So if you're a business that's thinking of going overseas, it's important to either go and spend time in that market yourself, And even better, I think sometimes is to have somebody on the ground in that country who can assist
Yeah.
you and help you,
Yeah.
localize your business. And then I think I'll talk about two last things before we wrap up. The first one might seem a little bit odd, but I said the role of the pub, not really business related, and a community radio station maybe might not sound politically correct to start with,
Mm,
but I think we in South Africa tend to think of a pub as a drinking hole. People go
mhm.
there and they overindulge. But I think in UK society, it's a little bit more than that. I suppose in some ways you can think of in South Africa we have shebeens, and again also shebeens are thought of as drinking holes, but it's actually really where the local community gathers. It's a place where it creates a sense of community, of warmth, this interaction across the spectrum, and I think it gives a common identity. So a lot of people, live in smaller homes. There's less space than what we're used to in South Africa. And the pub is like an extension of the home. It's a shared community. And I think that's super, super important, not just from a business perspective, but also life in general. Like, I think it's so easy. We've got a lot of challenges in South Africa that you forget that. But, the role of the pub, and we need to look in South Africa, is what are those things we can do to bring communities together to, engage, to support each other, be it in business and in life. So, yeah, that's just a, personal snippet. And then
Mm,
the last thing is, I think, I just want to emphasize this, is South Africans really do have a lot to offer. My biggest takeout from this trip, and as I said, I've been on a few of them, is that we have a lot to be thankful for and a lot
mhm.
to add. So yeah, we take our great weather for granted. We do have great skills. The matric results and that have just come out, and I think they were the best they've been. But we do. We often harden ourselves. We've got great skills across the spectrum in South
Yeah.
Africa. We're adaptable. We're innovative. As the saying goes, boer maak 'n plan,
Mhm.
and that's true. One of the things I found here is that people in the UK are hyper specialized. They just do their little thing. In South Africa, because we're used to dealing with so many issues and problems, you have
Yeah.
to think bigger. You got to think outside of the box, and we're really
Mhm.
good at that. And I think it stems from the fact that we don't necessarily have all the things that are more developed or market has. So we need to be creative. And that sense of problem solving with limited resources, if you can understand that, you can take advantage of that. We as South Africans are also incredibly hardworking, and we chat to people, and it's like a 9 to 4:30 job for a lot of people. Okay.
Mm,
South Africa, there's very few people that I know that work in, the work day in South Africa starts at 4:30 in the morning for most South Africans. It's a commute on a
yeah.
train or on a
Yeah.
bus. It's 2.5 hours. So we're used to working hard. And if we can think about how do we provide services into foreign markets, how do we be reminded that we're part of a much broader global ecosystem? It doesn't mean you need to immigrate. In fact, we're actually saying the opposite. Is provide services to the rest of the world, and that money and everything's going to flow back into South Africa. You can use your skills and products and export them, and it benefits our local communities. So you know today's discussion, as I say, it's maybe a little bit different to what we used to, but I thought it would be really cool, just to share some of those experiences with our listeners, and maybe just get us to think about some of our challenges and that in a different way. So, yeah, that's really all I have from today. But hopefully it resonates with our listeners, and I really look forward to being back in the studio and having some warm sunshine next week this time.
Awesome. I don't think you're ready for the sunshine though, but we would love to have you back and host you home next week. So enjoy yourself over there, and we'll see you next week.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sakhe. Have a lovely day. And to our listeners, we'll chat to you soon.
Awesome. Take care. Bye.